And welcome back to another episode of Screen Tested. I am your host, Tyrant, where we take things from movies, TV shows, pop culture, try to create them in the real world and test them one-on-one with the media they come from. Now in today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at an anime weapon. And funnily enough, this is actually an anime that I haven't gotten around to watching. I do want to watch it, and that is Spy X Family. It looks kind of fun and wholesome, but at the same time, it's got a little bit of action thrown in. I don't know. I think I'll like it. I haven't watched it because I haven't really been watching anime for the last year and a half, because when I watch anime, it kind of like consumes me, and I don't have time for that, so I've been avoiding it like the plague. Anyway, yes, the anime looks pretty good, and these weapons are kind of needles. They look like knitting needles, however, they do have some rings, I think, for some extra grip, and I actually think these are going to be pretty cool and pretty functional. I'm going to be trying to create them as faithfully as possible, reasonably speaking, of course. Then we'll get to the testing and give our final thoughts. Pretty simple, especially if you're new around here. So with all that out of the way, let's get started. So Yours needles, I actually think that they are a really good choice, a practical choice for like an assassin, right? They are something that you can carry in public, and you probably wouldn't raise too many eyebrows, specifically if you had, you know, some knitting and crochet stuff with you as well, of course. But generally speaking, for an assassin trying to get those into different places or trying to not raise suspicions, I actually think they're a really cool choice. And not only that, they're also probably going to be very practical. They are a real tool. It's like an ice pick. It's a sharp object. But yeah, let's get started with the build. So when it comes to the build for Yours needles, this was a fun one. It's actually relatively simple, and I'm excited to do this one more than just because of the episode reasons. Like, these are actually just functional items to make in a general sense, and I'm going to be using them in my workshop. Having a pointy object is useful no matter what. Anyway, so I started off with some solid brass round bar and some solid brass rings, basically. I threw the round bar onto the lathe and machined in a very rough taper that I will then take over to the belt sander and add on some more refined points. Then after that, I'm going to drill a hole through the rod, and this is where I'm going to attach the ring into. So then I'm going to cut the ring in half and bend it just ever so slightly so it can fit in. Then I'm going to heat the entire thing up. Because it's made of brass, both parts are made of brass, I can just solder them together, and that's exactly what I did. Get it up to temperature and then put on your solder, clean up those joints, give the whole thing a little bit of a sanding just to kind of make it look a little bit prettier, and give it a polish. And that's it. Very simple, very effective though. But with all that out of the way, let's get to the B-roll and then to the testing. I think we should mention that these aren't I wouldn't consider these a main weapon. This is not what I'm going to be carrying into battle. However, for an assassin, which is the context of the anime, I think they're pretty good for a couple of different reasons. First and foremost, these are concealable. They're very easy to use, like user experience. You poke things. They're fucking easy to use. But on top of that, there's also a valid reason to carry something, maybe not these exactly, but something similar. These are very similar to knitting needles, and as far as I'm aware, in pretty much every corner of the world, you can carry knitting needles because there are people out there who knit. So having something like this and saying, yes, I am knitting with them. I don't know how the fuck you knit. I've never knit in my life before. I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't know if that's how you do it. Anyway, as a weapon for an assassin, easily concealable, easy to use, I'm a big fan. Like, I actually really like these. I'm going to be using these in my workshop because these are actually just a good tool to have. It's always good to have some sort of pokey thing. But how good of a pokey thing are they really? Well, pretty good is the answer. I mean, you can stab with them. And there is also another caveat to them, and that is throwing weapons. Because these are, relatively speaking, not badly balanced, you probably can throw them as well. I don't know if you can see that on camera. So as throwing weapons, they've also got some potential there as well. And then because you have these large rings on them, that means you've got a good grip. On top of that, if they get stuck into, let's say, like a target, you can very easily retrieve them without all the crap. So as you can tell right off the bat, I am actually kind of a fan of these things. I think they are pretty legit and pretty cool. There's a hole. It puts holes in things. There are some drawbacks, obviously, right off the bat. When you get juices, I'll describe them as juices, human juices, blood. When you get blood on these, they become very slippery because they are a pure metal weapon. There's no handles or anything. However, because you have the rings, that can compensate for that. If you're enjoying today's episode, you should consider subscribing. It would really help out the channel and I would appreciate it. And thank you to everybody who's already subscribed. Let's get back to it. Ooh. That was a good shot. Did that go all the way through? I wasn't recording. So what are the drawbacks? We've mentioned a lot of the positive things and these things are fucking cool. Is there any negative ones? Well, like I said, slippery handles, but that can kind of be mitigated by using the ring. The only problem with that is it means that you can't really use them in a forward facing position when they're wet because they're going to be quite slippery. But the positive to that is because it's not a blade, if your hand slides on it, you're not actually going to hurt yourself. It's not like if your hand slipped onto a blade and it would cut your fingers off. So there is some give and take here that I think is fair. Now, when it comes to hitting a solid target like Tony, well, let's see how they go. Because these are primarily an assassination weapon, right? I wouldn't expect them to be going through armor. How do they go up against something like a flesh analog? Well, I mean, I shouldn't have to explain. They go straight through and leave some devastating holes. And that's not even ice picking them. Ice don't. I got fucking juices on me. That's what she said. So, Spy X family, yours, needles. Honestly, I'm a big fan of the design. I really like them. I think that they are quite versatile. They're really cool. Just not only as just like weapons, as tools, like as an actual tool, these are cool. On top of that, you have plausible deniability. They are knitting needles. I don't know how you knit, what the thing is for it. Anyway, so let's get into Tyrant's initial thoughts score, or TITS for short. Starting right off with the design. I think that's a good place to start. The design is very universal. It's a pick, it's a spike. It can be thrown, it's for pointing things, but at the same time, it's concealable, it's small, but also effective. The design is right up there. The only caveat that I would give to that is there's no handle. So as soon as these get wet or anything like that, or even when you hit something solid, you don't really have the most. They could do a little bit better, but that might remove the plausible deniability aspect, which is not good. So for the design, I would give it an 8. I don't think I'd give it a 10 or a 9. I just don't think that they are 100% there. There's some little things there. Next up, let's get into the comfort. Why not? We're on the design, we're on the comfort aspect. Perfectly wieldable, perfectly reasonable. So I'm also going to give it an 8. They're reasonably comfortable, but they could be improved just a touch. Then next, let's get into the effectiveness of these things. A 9. They can get through most things, however, getting through armor, that's where these are a little bit, they fall short a little bit. When you get into an armored opponent, they just don't have enough oomph to them. And I think the reason why is because they don't have a proper grip handle for them that you can really get good purchase on them to drive them through. I think that's what lets them down. Because you look at something like a rondel dagger, that can get through armor. Something like these, I just think the lack of handle is what can, really draw it down. Now, I know inevitably people are gonna bring up the anime that there is a handle on some versions, there's not. It's an anime, they're very inconsistent between scenes, so what can I say? These are the designs that I went with. Then lastly, we get into the wieldability. I mean, that's kind of on the user. These are incredibly versatile, a throwing weapon, a pointing weapon, You can, reverse them. You can have them at point. They are very wieldable in lots of different ways, which I love. Who would have thought? So for wieldability, I think a 9. Like, I think that there's a little bit of a caveat. I think if they were a lot longer, they'd be a lot more effective in a lot of ways. But in a general sense, they are still very wieldable. I don't have too much of a gripe with them. I think it's just the lack of a handle and also maybe a little bit more length. For assassin weapons, I think these are really, really good. These are like a great choice for the specific purpose of being an assassin. They're awesome. I'm a big fan of them personally, but that gives us a final score of 34 out of 40. That's good, man. That's pretty good, especially for something that's not even a main weapon. I dig these things. I think they are really good, really effective, and really versatile, which is personally what I think makes a good weapon. But that is going to be all for today's episode. I genuinely hope you enjoyed. Just a quick one, going over some spikes. I like them. I'm going to go put these in my workshop and actually use them. But for now, remember to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Leave a comment down below of something I should test in a future episode. And remember, if you want to become a channel member and help support this content, that would be awesome. I really appreciate it. I create exclusive content specifically for members, behind the scenes vlogs, things like that. You can always join at the links below. But that's going to be all for now. And as always, I will see you next week in another episode. Have a good one.